Welcome back to episode 4 of Limited Time Only. I'm your host, Hayden of Arsenal Pass, and this is a podcast focused on all things limited in the game of Flesh and Blood. This is season 1, and it is all about Outsiders Limited, particularly about draft. And on this episode, we're diving deep into one of the classes, looking at Assassin, both Arachne and Azuri in this draft format, how to draft them, how to have success with these heroes, the cards you need to look out for, the ways you should draft it, how to read signals that you should be in this hero, all these things with a very great guest. I have the absolute pleasure to have on the pod this week Chu Heng from Singapore, a player that is very well known in Singapore, regarded widely as probably one of the best players, if not the best player in Singapore, and someone that I've had some exposure to through Pro Tour Lille, at Worlds, at Singapore Calling last year, and had the pleasure to watch Chu Heng play, and is a phenomenal player, I can say. Previously had been a prison player, had top 16 in Lille, had top 16 the Calling in Singapore, both times just unfortunately losing win-ins to top 8s at both those events. Ended up having a pretty poor Worlds run, but then went and top 8'd the Calling on day 2 in San Jose with Icelander, and is just a player that is one of the forefronts of the game, and I think has a really interesting mind when it comes to Flesh and Blood. So I was super amped to have Chu Heng on the pod this week to talk about Assassin. So all those things are coming up. I want to say as well, a big thank you to everyone who's been tuning into Limited Time Only last week. No full episode, but last week we did do a draft overview. If you do like that format with the draft overviews, I'm going to do more of them if people want to see them. So make sure to definitely let me know about that. Drop it in the comments below. Say what you like or didn't like about those draft overviews, those walkthroughs, what you'd like to see maybe done differently, and I can make sure that gets done for you. So check that out. All those things coming up. Make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and without much ado, let's get into it and talk with Chu Heng. Episode 4 of Limited Time Only, and I have the absolute pleasure of having on with me Chu Heng from Singapore. Chu Heng, welcome to the pod.
Hello. Hi.
It's great to have you on. Now, we first met actually at Worlds. I think we've crossed paths a few times at like Lille and Worlds, but I finally came and stalked you at Worlds, didn't I? And grabbed you for a quick interview for the vlog, and we had a quick chat. And actually, that weekend you ended up top 8'ing the Calling, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I think considering what happened to my post tournament, I think that's one of the better things that happened that weekend.
Yeah, you started off a bit rough, but obviously not playing day 2, moving over to the Calling, and I think in the end you took Icelander to the Calling, right? And
Yeah.
was it your quarterfinals or your semifinals that you ended up falling in?
I ended up losing in the semi-finals. Yeah. I think I lost to the same Bravo twice. I lost to him once in Swiss, and then I lost in the top 4 to the same guy.
Couldn't quite get the revenge play. Well, so thankful to have you on here. I've wanted to have you on one of our pods for a long time. I think people that I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you, but people that may not know you won't know how I think highly regarded you are amongst a lot of top players in the world, even if people don't necessarily know who you are. And I know in Singapore, people always tell me about end boss Chu Heng. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you play, and maybe shout out a bit of the Singapore community as well.
Okay. So hi, I'm Chu Heng. I'm from Singapore. So I think I started the game just right after Monarch. Yeah. And I played like that skirmish season and stuff. So I'm not new to like trading card game tournaments and stuff. I used to play a lot of Magic. I think I played for over a decade before this. So Flesh and Blood. I think when I picked up Flesh and Blood. I thought it was a very interesting game. When one of my closer friends introduced the game to me, via like one of his other friends, which so I think I played. He gave me a demo and I really enjoyed it, and then we played it for like the whole evening. So after that, I was pretty hooked onto it. Yeah. So I'm here now.
And whereabouts in Singapore, do you have a local store that you play at? Do you have a local sort of play group or testing group that you tested for like Leal and Worlds with? Or have you kind of, is it just more of a, is Singapore more of a community who kind of plays and tests together?
I think there are a couple of different play groups that go to different stores in Singapore. The store that I generally will be at, especially on Wednesdays, is Gamersaurus Rex, where I run the armories in there too. And I think this weekend there's a skirmish
Hmm.
that I'm organizing as well for the store. Yeah.
Is it Blitz or
I
Limited?
think it's a blitz for this weekend. I
Oh,
think some of my players uh profess their love for the format.
oh
So
no.
yeah.
What this podcast comes out next week, so it would have already happened. But what are you going to play in
Yeah.
Blitz this weekend?
If I do end up playing this weekend, I'll be playing Kano. I think Kano is really fun in Blitz. Yeah.
Chu Heng, you're a recent Kano player as well. I know post Worlds you picked up on Kano and you played it. I think in Battle Hardened in Singapore as well,
Yeah.
plus the PTI event. I think you top aided both. Tell us about your kind of, because traditionally you went. I remember you as first a player who was known for Prism and then Icelander, and now you've moved to someone called the Dark Side with Kano. What kind of inspired the move? Just Stormstrider's love, or?
Not really. I was trying something else outside of Icelander, since Prism has Living Legends. So outside of Icelander, I think the next closest would be Kano, because it's also another wizard. Partially because I've been playing Icelander pretty much ever since Prism Living Legends, so that's been like a, a long, like 5+ months. So I was hoping to try something new and interesting, which is why I picked up Kano. Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't go so well at the Procrest. I think I played the deck a little bit too much at Armories. I ended up running into Dromai with Oasis, Sand Cover, and Arena Sprayer. It was kind of overkill to just beat Kano, but it is what it is.
I heard though that if you're in Singapore, then you target Chu Heng. So people knew what you're going to play and they came prepared. And I heard some people reveling in their wins against you.
Uh, yeah, I don't think people revel in the win so much, but they are like I I somehow picked up the rep in Singapore as being a really good player. So suddenly, when people meet me, they're like, "Oh, it's Chewing," I paired him, so I'm probably not gonna win. I'm just to me, I'm just another FAB player. So
Well, I think the reps are well earned based on results. Why don't we talk a little bit about Outsiders Limited, because that's obviously limited time only, what we're here to do. First of all, I want to get your take on this Outsiders Limited format. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What are the kind of key things that you're enjoying or not enjoying about this format so far?
oh, I absolutely love the Outsiders format. For limited, especially the draft format. I don't really enjoy Sealed, because Sealed seems a little more like one dimensional in terms of like deck building, because of how many cards you have access to, how many generics there are in the set compared to like Uprising. But for draft, I think draft is a really interesting format for outsiders. There are a lot more strategies you can go into, uh, especially like given there are, I think, 6 different heroes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, each hero has potential, has very different. Some of them, not all, but mainly like Riptide and Uzuri. You could play it aggressively, or you can play defensively, which is what I like about this Outsiders Limited. Like certain decks are not as one-dimensional and linear as Uprising.
Yeah. Do you think it's something that's been talked about with most of my guests on the pod so far is coming from a format like Uprising, where we didn't really have archetypes? Outsiders is a bit of a breath of fresh air where you do have the opportunity to play different archetypes. Do you think we're seeing a good move on from what the Uprising format was?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think most drafts should be similar, if not like I mean, it should be quite the same because in Uprising, what you had was you just had to pick a specific like set of cards, and then all your decks, all the good decks will pretty much look the same.
Mm.
Whereas for Outsiders so far, I think maybe outside of Azalea and Arachne, every other deck will like every time you choose your deck, you'll probably look slightly different, compared to previously where when you 3-0 with the Icelander, your deck will probably look the same as the previous 3-0 you had. Whereas the current 3-0, like when you 3-0 with Riptide, it could be a defensive build or it can be a more offensive build, depending on how the draft went. So I think that's a really good that's a step in the right direction, especially for draft.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm really interested to pull on that thread you just said about maybe Azalea and Arachne being a little bit less dynamic. And we're going to talk about, of course, as the title suggests in this pod, we're going to talk about how to draft Assassin with Chu Heng. I want to ask you, before we start to get into drafting Assassin, what heroes are you liking? What heroes actually have you drafted the most so far? And do you have a preference for class or hero in this format so far?
All right. So we'll start with the preferences. So for preferences, I don't really have much preference. I tend to draft quite open, I think. Which is I think a better strategy going into this draft format. As for which hero I drafted the most, I've drafted Assassins the most actually.
We found the right man to talk to then.
Yeah. Assassins is probably one of the better classes to draft. I think, in my opinion. I've also drafted quite a lot of Ranger and not so much on Ninja because Ninja is, I think, very tricky in this one.
Yes.
But the other tricky character I think that's hard to draft is Azalea. I actually tried to draft Azalea a couple of times already. So I think Azalea is also the other very tricky hero to draft because of how your deck composition has to be pretty specific.
Yes. Yeah, I found the same drafting Azalea.
Compared to the Assassin.
Yeah, you really need a certain. There's some cards that are really important. Like a card like Spire Sniping is I think a really important card in that archetype. Your Scout the Peripheries. I feel like your pumps really need to be. You need to have a certain amount of them, and you need to not have much filler. I feel like if you have too much filler or just kind of cards that aren't doing a specific job in Azalea, you can really get punished. So yeah, it's interesting format so far. How many drafts have you done so far? Do you know off the top of your head how many drafts you've done so far?
At least 10, I think, so far. About yeah. Quite a lot of drafts. Yeah, I've been mainly playing a lot of. I've been mainly playing Outsiders Limited rather than Classic Constructed after Outsiders release.
Yeah, well, you did tweet and say you're enjoying this limited format, but not so much the constructed format. So
yeah, Limited has been very interesting actually. Specifically Azalea, I've been trying a lot of it. So there are certain I think I would say it's the Kano of the format compared to in Arc I think Kano works about the same way. Ironically Azalea is also in the same format.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's music to my ears. I think I've done 2 Azalea draft. I actually 0-3'd with an Azalea draft. I just got the, like you said, deck composition. I got it completely wrong in one of my first drafts. I ended up with like cards that I thought were just good cards in the format, which just didn't work in Azalea. So I'm excited to go back and draft some more Azalea and try it again. Yeah. I mean, this is a format where I just keep wanting to draft. Like I finish a draft and I want to do another one. I'm just looking for people. I'm like, can we do a draft tonight? Can we do a draft this weekend? I'm just asking people like, when can we get our next draft in?
I basically share the same sentiment. After I finish a draft, I'm like, okay, I can't wait for the next day, the next armory where some store is holding a draft, and I'll go there and all right, let's go. Let's start another draft.
Yeah. I feel the same. Well, we are talking in this pod drafting Assassin. It's a class that Chu Heng, as just said, drafted a lot of. I've drafted, I think, Ninja's actually interestingly opposite to Chu Heng. Ninja's the class I've drafted the most, I think, at this point. But Assassin is not far behind. And I wanna what we're basically gonna do in this pod, and we're gonna cover this over the next couple of weeks with different guests. We're gonna cover the Assassin class, Ninja, of course, Ranger, and we're really gonna dive deep into how to draft these classes, how to draft each of the two heroes, the cards you're looking for, the way you want to get into it, or maybe not get into it, the ways to read signals to find yourself into the best spot to draft these classes and heroes. So first of all, Chu Heng, I want to ask you, what makes you want to play Assassin in Outsiders Limited?
All right. So, the one of the reasons why I like Assassin is the weapon choice. Spider's Bite got downgraded to a common from Dynasty, so to a token. Yeah. So, Spider's Bite is really strong in a limited format, considering everybody has to run attacks. Otherwise, you can't really close the game, especially in the format with Rangers, where their only source of damage is coming from the arrows, which are all attacks. So Spider's Bite makes all your, because I think most assassin cards in this format are 0 cost 3 attack cards. So when you hit with a Spider's Bite, they are basically 0 for 4s. Considering the next time they defend with an attack, it gets -1. So that's one of the main reasons why I like Assassin, is that Spider's Bite is such a strong weapon in the format. And the other is Assassins in this draft format is the trickiest class compared to Ninja, where Ninja is more or less more straightforward. Taking notes from fight. It's just surging strikes, and then it's the next combo line and stuff. Whereas Assassin is, all right, here I have an Assassin attack after my Spider's Bite hit. So how much are you exactly blocking it for? Because I have some attack reactions, either from my hero ability with Uzuri or, Razor's Edge. Yeah. So I think drafting Assassin is, you get to utilize some mind games, especially with Uzuri's hero ability, and even Aragni, because your go again attack, your opponent had to guess what's the second attack coming in. It can be anything. It can be another stealth attack with like on hits. It could be a generic on hit attack, or it could just be nothing.
Arsenal
You can just
pass.
pass the turn. Yeah, you can just pass the turn, and then now your opponent is like,
I've got
maybe
a dead card in my hand.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could have. Maybe I could have blocked more earlier. Maybe I could have blocked the Spider's Bite even. It's very tricky. Yeah, so that's why I like Assassin in this mode.
Yeah, you do have a reputation for playing the more complex of the heroes, I think, in this game, and enjoying them. I think on that point, obviously weapons super strong, cause a lot of dichotomies in the game and decisions to be made on both sides of the table. I think the other thing that often gets overlooked is, the Spider's Bite applies to the first time attacks are used to defend. So, in the case of Arachne, even there's a lot of decisions about, do they block the first one to get value off their attacks defending in the second one? And then as the Arachne player, sometimes you're like, okay, well, they defend this first attack because clearly they want to try and block out the second attack. I just won't play my second attack. I'm just going to save it as my fifth card for the potential next turn. There's so many decisions to be made, which I also have been really enjoying about both playing Arachne and Uzuri. And you touched on, Assassin being maybe one of the more complex versus Ninja. The way I found it is, I think Ninja is more complex in the draft stage of things, and Assassin has been more complex in the playing stage of the game.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Ninja is really tricky to draft. Given my experience with Ninja, it's more or less like Feast of Famine. You either have a really good deck, or like you end up having a pile.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most of Ninja comes from the drafting stage, whereby you're hoping for slightly better card variants, and then not only that, you have to read the signals whether Ninja is like open in the format. Yeah, and I think Ninja is probably like Ninja and Ranger in this draft. If there are like more than 3 drafters, I think your deck is more or less gone.
Yeah. Assassin is a bit more like Fire in that regard, in terms of it can support more players at the table, would you say? Because of Spider's Bites and the kind of just use of, you can use a wider card pool.
Yeah, because of Spider's Bite, mainly, and also because the unlike Uprising, I think this format has a lot more playable generics. So you might just end up with a more or less generic deck, and your deck will probably still function well.
Yeah, I
And
think as I say, a yellow stealth card is a lot better than a yellow brain freeze as well.
yeah, that's yeah. Your average yellow card in this format is a lot better.
Strengths. Let's talk strengths of the two heroes because they are, on the surface of things. I think when people were playing pre-release, Azuri, Arachne, I heard a lot of criticism of these heroes feel the same. My experience in draft has been these do not feel the same. They feel like quite different heroes. So maybe you could touch on what you think are some of the strengths of each of the heroes. So what are Azuri's strengths versus Arachne's strength in this draft format?
Right. So I think most of this negative connotation comes from Shield because in Shield Uzuri tends to be the better of the assassins because of access to a larger card pool. So Uzuri tend to have you can build more defensive and get away with it because first of all you have 20 life, right? So that's for Shield. So and for Shield sometimes you don't have enough or good stealth cards for Arachne to utilize to go again. So maybe Arachne isn't as good in suit. But for draft, I would say it's really is the other way around where Arachne is probably the better assassin. So the strength of Uzuri is her hero ability itself. So when you present a Spider's Bite as the first attack and your opponent chooses not to block it, and all you have to do is put any random stealth attack. It doesn't matter what color it is, doesn't matter what it does. The card more or less can have no text except stealth, and your opponent had to guess like what he's gonna get hit by, because it could be anything. You can, as long as it's 2 costs or lower, which is I think every card in this format actually. As long as the attack that's 2 costs or lower, you can sneak it in. Maybe it's a go again attack, maybe it's a 2 4 6, maybe it's a sneak attack, which is the best, like the sneak attack rate, which is the highest damage card you could sneak in, I think. It could be anything. So when your opponent had to guess that much, it's really hard for them to block when you're playing Uzuri. That's the strength of Uzuri. So if you overblocks it and you put in a like Blue Ravenous Rebel, for example, suddenly your third attack becomes that much stronger. And for Uzuri, you can actually get away with. So the strength of Uzuri is also that you are more flexible in the draft because your hero ability is not tacked onto. Your hero ability is only you just have to fulfill the stealth part of it, and the second part can be basically anything that that goes into your deck strategy. So you could have a big attack behind and play a lot more defensive. So you can pick cards like Peace of Mind, Seeker's Equipment, and you can afford to block with maybe 2 to 3 cards even. So you preserve your life total quite a lot. Or you can play the more aggressive build where you sneak in, go again attacks, or you just start with go again attacks and then you just completely ignore your hero build and you play just a more aggressive version of Uzuri.
Mm-hmm.
So your opponent had to keep basically he has to keep guessing which version of Uzuri you are playing, especially in the early turns. That's for Uzuri. So that's the strength of Uzuri, where you can either go really defensive or you can go really offensive, and the in between is your opponent still has to play around your hero ability. The hero ability is it always works as long as you have a stealth card. All right, so moving on to Arachne, I think the strength of Arachne is just you're secretly the ninja of the format because you have access to go again on your stealth cards. So Arachne's strength is whenever you get to play with 3 to 4 cards, especially 4 cards, you are probably the strongest hero in the format. Only maybe you have a couple of bad matchups, but as Arachne, your damage output is considerably higher compared to Uzuri, with access to go again, and how well you can utilize your weapon, which is the Spider's Web. So cards like on hit effects like Wither Infect are exceptionally strong, and because you have access to Razor's Edge, uh, Razor's Edge is extremely powerful in Arachne. So when you pair that together with the Spider's Bite and attack with an on hit, so Infect basically becomes like, let's say you have a Infect red and your opponent blocks you for 3, because like maybe he blocked your first Spider's Bite attack or you cannot afford to pay for it. He blocks you for 3, and then you come out with Razor's Edge. Suddenly Razor's Edge is actually dealing 5 damage because of the Blood Rod box that comes with it. Yeah, so that's and not only that, after you do damage, you still have go again. So maybe you have another attack behind it, 0 for 4, or you could just arsenal and pass. Your opponent had to keep guessing, like what you're doing. And if you overblocks the go again attack, for example, then you still have another window to present even more damage behind because you off the go again. So that's Arachne is known to be quite explosive on their turn. Yeah, which is one of the reasons why you should play Arachne.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said. It's I think a great distilling down of Arachne versus Azuri and the strengths. I think I kind of put it as Azuri as a bit more flexible of a hero. Like you say, you've got these abilities to play defensive or offensive. I think Azuri can play both as well. I think you can play, you can actually include traps plus some more aggressive cards in your deck, like, go again attacks, and play different ways on different turns, more like a mid-range kind of strategy. But I want to talk about something you said. You said you put in a blue Ravenous Rabble. So talk to me about cards with Go Again and Azuri. How important do you think they are? And do you think people are overlooking a card like, for instance, blue or yellow Ravenous Rabble in a deck like that because of what it can do with the hero ability?
Yeah. So people tend to assume that every time you're giving Uzuri's ability is going to be like a 2 for 6 attack, right? Because there are a couple of them in this format and generic. Or it could be a 2 for 5, it could be anywhere around the range. So Go Again attacks lets you go around that because there are certain scenarios where people try to play around the Uzuri ability. So the first of them is when you have like maybe one card left in hand, your opponent could choose not to block at all because what's the worst that can happen, right? It's only a 2 for 6, maybe someone hits, or maybe even you're just gonna arsenal a card. Why am I blocking this attack? Right. So anywhere along that lines, that's with one card. But when you have like 2 cards, for example, your opponent's gonna assume you're gonna arsenal the last card. So when they overblock your attack to not take damage, your Go Again suddenly becomes so much more effective. Because after your opponent overblocks and you're like, okay, I'm gonna preserve this stealth card for later. I'm gonna give you this Ravenous Rebel blue that I picked to maybe fill my blue slot. Alright, so I can use my Spider's Bite. And then here at the back, maybe a like Sick Horizon for 4, And then suddenly they have to consider whether they want to take that 4 damage or they block it and then the turn is that much worse. So that's that's assuming you have like a bad Go Again attack, like Ravenous Rebel Blue, which could potentially be 0 attack. But let's say you have a Ravenous Rebel Red, you can actually extend your combat chain. So now you can even start with Ravenous Rebel into Spider's Bite, and that makes it much harder to block the Spider's Bite, and it makes your like 2 for 6s with on hits potentially get a lot better. And your turn went from maybe being about 7 damage to now you have more than maybe 10 or higher. Yeah, so that's the strength of Go Again in Missouri.
Yeah,
where your opponent had to guess like, okay, maybe I block the first attack and then here I have a Go Again and then another one.
the turn changes, like you're saying, that kind of the ideology that just there's so many different lines to play and your opponent has to think on their toes about what you could do, and conversely you can sort of play around those plays. You can sort of next level your opponent a little bit. What about with Arachne? Like one thing, how important are the Go Against Arachne? Because you have that built in with the hero ability. In that instance, are just good stealth cards more important? My kind of takeaway personally has been, in Azuri, blue, yellow stealth cards, all these are pretty reasonable. But in Arachne, red just because of that, what you talked about before, they can Spider's Bite turns them into a 0/4. That's the most important thing to me. Do you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I agree that raids are a lot stronger in Arachne than they are in Uzuri. Uzuri is I would say Uzuri, anything goes as long as it's stealth, unless you drafted a lot of attack reactions as well, because you're still an assassin, right? So but for Arachne, because of how your hero ability works, you want to utilize the stealth synergy with Go Again as much as you can. And to make it stronger, you have to, pair with Spider's Bite, which is why I don't think Arachne is very good when you force it to block. But when you give it like a full grip, it will function quite similarly to 5 from the previous format, whereby you have a lot of difficulty blocking his attacks, especially when they're red. But even when they're yellow, because this format has a lot of 2 blocks, you will end up having even problems blocking like a yellow attack from Arachne after you eat the spider's web.
Yep.
So for Arachne, I think I think other than red stealth attacks, I think the other like important cards that you have to draft are attack reactions, because that's what makes your attacks even that much scarier.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we just kind of, I guess, before we move on from the strengths, and why don't we just kind of tie up the core game plans of each of the heroes? So you just give me kind of like top line, if I find myself in Uzuri, or I find myself in Arachne, or I want to draft these heroes, like what are the core game plans of each of those two heroes?
Okay, for Uzuri, I would say let's start with the easier one, which is Arachne. Right? So Arachne, I would say, is more linear. You draft as many red stealth attacks as possible, hopefully picking up a few prowls along the way. The prowls can be of any color because of how you just want your next stealth attack to have +1, which is what can push it over the top. Your red stealth attacks, preferably one of the three, the main three, which is Inertia, Fealty, or Blood Rock Box. In fact, being the strongest. I think it's called Reader, Sedate, and
Yep, that's right. Wither and Sedate. And Infect.
Reader, Sedate, and Infect, yeah. So Infect being the strongest of the three because of how damage is good in draft. So if you can draft those in red, I would say your deck is probably really good. But you can also draft a couple of generics to go along with those stealth cards. It can be 2/6s. It can be any of the attacks you go again, or it could be just 0/4s. Or if you have no choice, 0/3s. Basically as aggressive as possible, and attack reacts. Attack reacts are the main core to drafting a Rani. You need to have attack reactions to make your hero ability be good. Otherwise, your opponent can just block you out with card. He can just, it's just a 0/3. I'm just gonna block for 3, and then okay, let's call it a day. And then that's when the Rani is bad, because now you're just trading hit gems with your opponent, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. You just deck yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. That's for Arachne, because it's
Can we stay on Arachne for a second? Let's just, since we're kind of talking through, and you already started to talk about the things you want to draft in there. Let's talk about some of the specific cards that you want to prioritize. So, what for you in Arachne? And I think I've got some for myself, but like, what are your top priority picks if you want to draft Arachne? Like, is Infect like a pack one pick one? Is that the top of the list? Is it Red Razor's Edge? Is it the spike with Frailty, Inertia, Blood Rock Box? Is it those cards?
Yeah.
Like, where's the kind of draft order for you, and how are you kind of evaluating these cards? What cards do you really feel like you need, and in what order?
Okay, so let's say you really enjoy playing Arachne in this draft format, and you're like, I must play Arachne, and then you open your pack, and what you should be looking out for are cards like Spike with Blood Rock, Spike with Fealty, Infect, and Wither, both in red, hopefully. Inertia is low priority if you want to draft a rugby, I would say, because people tend to be able to play around inertia quite a bit, either by blocking you uh or just by playing out their whole hand. Some heroes are really capable of doing that. So if you want to play a rugby, I'll look out for Infect Reader and their respective spikes, which is Spike Barrel and Spike
Yep.
30. Yeah. And the last card I'll look out for is Prowl. Because yeah, making your attack 0 for 4 base without Spider's Bite is really awkward to block in this format.
Yeah. What about, I guess, any like some cards that come to mind for me is I really like Red Springload in Arachne to pair with my blues. So that sort of game pattern of weapon, red, stealth card into something like Springload, or a Seek Horizon red as well as another card you talk about. Those I find are quite high priority, along with Razor's Edge. Do you find those cards pretty high priority?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the Razor's Edge. But yeah, if you have a Razor's Edge red, right? Yeah, you should probably pick that for Arachne. Springload, I think Springload is a little interesting because of how Arachne plays out. So for Arachne, you tend to be able to play out every card in your hand, which is one of his strengths. So Springload is extremely powerful, especially at one cost. But something else to look out for, because if you had drafted a bunch of blues, cards like Cut Down to Size is also very strong in Arachne. Outside of their pure damage, right? So some turns maybe your stealth card isn't that strong. It's a yellow stealth card. It's a malign, maybe it has no on hit effect. Your opponent just takes the damage. So maybe you go something like Spider's Bite, malign, and your opponent just takes. Now, when you pair that with a second Spider's Bite, your last card could actually be a 2 for 6 or 2 for 5, with an on hit effect, because you pitch 2 blues to activate both Spider's Bite. So cards like Cut Down to Size, Humble, Wreak Havoc, Destructive Deliberation, I think. Yeah, the one that on hit ponders. Yeah, those cards suddenly become a lot stronger in Arachne because of how it pairs along well with your pitch, because you're pitching for Spider's Bite with blue cards. Yeah, so those cards are really good as well. Or you could, sometimes you end up with a lot of yellows in your draft. You could pair with a Seek Horizon even. Seek Horizon, to me, you don't always have to give it go again. You can just throw it out as a damage or Infectious Close. Or even like cards like Death Touch. Death Touch is really powerful in the Arachne, especially when you can get it in your arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
I mean, Death Touch just continues to be just one of the best cards in this format, I find. Be you Ranger, be you Azuri, be you Arachne, like it just seems to always overperform. I want to talk a bit, just quickly touch on something that's come up a bit in my Arachne games and get your viewpoint on this. Is you talked about double Spider's Bite, and I've seen people misplay with double Spider's Bite a lot, where they'll attack once a Spider's Bite, their opponent won't block, and then they attack again with Spider's Bite, and now their opponent effectively gets a free block, right? So I just explain how that works quickly in case people don't really understand this, so or it hasn't come up yet maybe for you. So you attack with your Spider's Bite, you pay your 2 resources, and the opponent takes 1. Now, if you attack with your second Spider's Bite immediately afterwards, your opponent actually is super incentivized to defend that Spider's Bite because they gain value from it, because they can throw their 2-block attack, which now defends for 1 because of the Spider's Bite ability, and they trade that card. But now you're not going to get, there's no Spider's Bite ability for the rest of the turn. Whereas had you only attacked with 1 and then they block, there's still that Spider's Bite ability. So what I've been finding is the play pattern, Chu Heng, that I've been following a lot is if I'm on a turn where I'm going to use my full hand and double blue, say, like you talked about, something like a cut down to size the end of the chain. So say I have blue, cut down to size yellow, and a red infect, for instance. My play pattern generally is going to be Spider's Bite, infect with go again, Spider's Bite into my final attack. Are you finding the same thing?
Yeah, that is actually the most powerful part of rugby, is when you pair your Spider's Bite in between attacks, you weave it in, and then suddenly, most of the time your opponent will be wondering like why he didn't block the Spider's Bite to begin with, and then every time he blocks with 2 cards, the following Spider's Bite becomes even more annoying because he has to like I said, you have to continue guessing what's the last attack
Hmm.
because it could be irrelevant or it could be, and in fact, it could be a winner. It could be anything. So when you pair, like when you weave in the spider's bite between your attacks, your turn gets that much stronger. And yeah, you'll just find that a lot of decks cannot deal with it,
Hmm.
especially if you're not, Riptide, because you
Yep.
don't have a lot of defense reactions or, even peace of mind.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk a bit about this when we get to Azuri, but I want to talk about rate. Actually, let's talk about ratios now. So I've been finding that I want more blues in Arachne because of the thing we just talked about. Double Spider's Bite is actually better in Arachne. It's actually often quite poor in Azuri because your opponent just free value blocks the second one, and then when you play your stealth card and potentially your swap, they've got a lot more room to maneuver. You've given them that room to maneuver, which Chu Heng just talked about with double blocking potentially or single blocking. You've given them all these choices. So what kind of ratios are you looking for? Give me your thoughts on blues. Give me your thought on red stealth cards. How many do you want? How many attack reactions do you want? Let's just go through it all. Choose where you want to start.
All right, so for Arachne, I would say anything along the lines of about 8 to let's go with eight. 8 to about 10 blues
Mhm.
is the highest. Right. That range is where I'll be comfortable. You can stinge a little on blues if you drafted a lot of yellows. So maybe you can even go to 7. You can stay around the 7, 6 to 8 range, maybe even. But preferably you want, especially if you drafted like spring loads, you want up about 8 to 10 blues. So you can at least play on your turns. Either like when you drafted either spring load, or maybe even some death touch because they cost 1. As long as you have a 1 cost attack, I think having more blues really fits into your game plan. Oh, and if you have drafted a lot of spikes, spike with anything. Blues also help a lot because you can go spider's bite, attack, spike, and then chain into another attack of like that's
Yep.
3 cards. Yeah. So having more blues is quite beneficial to Arachne. So about 8, I would say around 8 to 10 is good. And regarding how many red stealth attacks you should have, I mean, ideally you have all of them in red. You don't you kind of don't want any yellows because yellows
Just not
are
as good.
slightly below. Yeah, they're just not as good. But uh as even I wouldn't say like I would say drafting yellows isn't the worst, especially when you're paying for Spider's Bite,
Hmm.
to change it to a red attack, or even like yellow or blue prowls, which I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
Yellow or blue prowls are extremely playable because they enable your better cards.
And they
You
still
can,
defend
you can,
3 against rangers and ninjas, which is still really
yeah,
key.
exactly. So other than the fact that assassins have really good defense values, your attacks also have really good upside. So cards like Infect Reader, Sedate all have on-hit effects, so your opponent can not just, I block with 1 card, take 1, because Barrot increases the damage to, it's not just take 1, you take 3. Then Virility basically blanks Kodachis and Kodachis, arrows because they can be 5 for arsenals, spiders bite. So Virility is really high value. And Inertia is extremely good into rangers because they tend to like to end their turn with an arsenal. Right. So all these on hit effects, they are quite relevant in general. So as long as your stealth attacks are any of those, like it can be in any of the colors, honestly,
Yeah.
they'll be pretty relevant.
I,
But
I found
preferably red.
I found that like 6 red is kind of like minimum. Like I really want to be seeing one a hand ideally. So like
Yeah.
through the game, especially if I'm playing pretty aggressively, and I'm happily play. If I'm gonna get 10 good red stealth attacks, I'm not gonna complain. I'll play them.
If you get 10 red stealth attacks, I think most people will be wondering what happened in the draft
Yeah.
because they'll not know what's hitting them. And then, yeah, they just find it really hard to block.
What
So if you get anything along the range of red attacks, your deck's really good.
Yeah. What
Nothing to
about
complain.
attack reactions? Like, how many do you ideally want? Because I've actually found that you can have too many. I mean, the good thing is they do block 3. Apart from, I want to hear your thoughts on short and sharp because it's a card that I'm not particularly fond of because, of course, the base attack of 2 it doesn't pair with some of your best cards. But like if I've been finding, 5 to 7 attack reactions has been like a really good number if I can get them, and a couple of them being red. That is quite difficult. I'm happy to play 3 or 4 if I have to, but if I can get around 5, I'm pretty happy.
Ideally, about 6 is where you want to be
There
at,
we go.
especially if they are Spike with Blood Rod or Razor's Edge in red. Having those are really good. Since we have talked about like how many reds you want, right? Self attacks. Short and sharp is actually better the more yellows you drop. So when you find that maybe pack variants or even possibly some other assassin taking the red attacks and you end up with a lot of yellows, short and sharp is your replacement for Razor's Edge that you might not find, because suddenly your yellow attacks, your in fact being below red suddenly and basically enables your yellow attack enables short and sharp. So short and sharp becomes your second Razor's Edge. So yeah, and Razor's Edge is interesting in a sense. No, not Razor's Edge. Short and sharp is also interesting in the sense that it can buff your Spider's Bite. So when you need that Spider's Bite to hit, so your 0 for 3s become 0 for 4s, short and sharp becomes very good in the sense. Because now people have to block your say Reader with 2 cards instead of 1.
Yeah.
And not only that, because to block a Spider's Bite, people tend to use a 2 block card. So when you throw in a red short and sharp, you're actually pushing through not only the on hit, you're also pushing through 2 damage.
Yep.
Which is what you're trying to get out of most of your attacks this format. You at least try to get through 2 damage.
Yep. Where do you think? So like I kind of, we should move on to Azuri because we've talked a lot about Arachne, but my last kind of, I guess, question is Razor's Edge. I think for me is Razor's Edge red is like the premier attack action. I think attack reaction, and my kind of view on this is the 0 cost is actually really, really relevant because we've talked if people might have heard this, but we've talked a lot about cost structure. Blues versus yellows versus 1 cost versus 2 costs versus Spider's Bite. And my kind of my piece of advice that I have for people is that honestly, my finding is that the cheaper is generally the better because you're going to find these hands that are awkward and can't do all the things you want. Sometimes you're going to have 1 blue plus Spider's Bite plus a Spring Load and a Short and Sharp and your stealth card. And if that was a Razor's Edge, your hand would work, and without the Razor's Edge and a Short and Sharp, your hand doesn't work. Do you disagree? Do you think? Because I really think Razor's Edge red is like very premium, and if you want to draft Arachne personally,
Razor's Edge is probably the premier attack reaction in Arachne or in Assassin in general, purely because some of your attacks already have the on hit impact. So not needing to pay the extra 1 resource just to give it an on hit is extremely powerful. And it allows you to play around with, resourceless hands. Maybe you choose 4 reds. You can pay for your Spike with Blood Rod, you can play your Spike with Inertia, Spike with Frailty, but you can always play out the Razor's Edge, especially when you have a stealth card. And Razor's Edge is probably the other like premier arsenal card. Because normally like you can't pay for your spikes, your arsenal, you save it for a rainy day, maybe the next turn where you draw your blues. But for Razor's Edge, when you arsenal it, like you could even draw another full red hand and the card will still be good. So I really value Razor's Edge a lot. And the best part of Razor's Edge is you can draft multiple of them and you can even play it all out in the same turn. Because for in this case of Spike, when you attack with your Spider's Bite, for example, you cannot play the second one because now you are 1 resource short. But with Razor's Edge, you can do whatever. You can attack with your 0 for 3 with 2 cards remaining, and your opponent maybe, it's only 3 damage. I mean, at most you tack on the Razor's Edge, maybe you tack on another like Spike. It's only 6 damage. Maybe I can take it. I have a high enough life total, and suddenly that's 9.
Yep. And 2 on hit effects instead of 1. If it's the Spike.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to, I guess, there's one thing I've noticed in drafts that I kind of want to share because we've just been talking about the kind of differences between Azuri and Arachne, and I promise we will get onto Azuri a bit more, but the one pattern I've been finding with drafts is that I think you can tell what people at the table are drafting based on what cards are coming around, and I think you can position yourself as an assassin potentially in the opposite side of that. So people really value these red and yellow generics quite highly if they're drafting Azuri, and I find that people find that easy to do because they can identify, hey, here's a big attack, I put that in my deck, it does work, right? So they prioritize this highly. And then what you'll start to see come around is cards like the Prows, it is some of the attack reactions, it is these yellow attack actions, these yellow stealth cards, which you can actually wheel and go still well into your deck. And I think you can my takeaway is that if you are drafting assassin, I think you can pretty quickly, almost by about sort of early pack 2, position yourself into Azuri and Arachne and really get paid off for it by sort of reaping the rewards on the wheel of the pack. I don't know if you've found similar, Chu Heng.
Yeah, I noticed that cards that wheel tend to be, blue assassin attacks. So you can start by taking okay, so I think you mentioned before that there's a difference in maybe pack distribution in Japanese packs and packs from Belgium. Yeah. So since I'm from Singapore, I draft the packs from Japan. So those packs are very evenly distributed. So you know that there's exactly two assassin cards in the pack. Right. So it's very easy to tell when people have taken an assassin card because there'll be one left rather than two. So when you see that as a kid, like maybe one of them is a yellow one and then is a red, you can actually take the red one, and the yellow one tends to come back because no one likes to draft yellows. It's like ingrained into people that yellows are not good, but that's not really the case for this set. As long as you have playable cards, I mean, yellows enable spiders, but I mean, why wouldn't it be good?
Yep.
So there's always a really good chance the blues and yellows will table. So that's also an interesting observation that I had, because sometimes when you know a class is overdrafted, you don't even see the blues come back.
Yeah.
That's when there are like 3 to 4 assassin players at the table.
Yeah.
But
the yellows.
Let's say in a draft where you see like the yellows come back, I mean, I'm happy to take it. Especially if they have an on hit. Sometimes they infect yellow tables, then I can't be upset. It's really good.
Yeah, I think because of that as well, because of those cards like yellow, potential on hits, wheeling, the attack reactions have a real high premium for me, I think, because I want to make sure I have those to make my yellows better, for instance. Anyway, Chu Heng, we've talked so much about Arachne because I've been really enjoying the kind of dichotomy that Arachne gives in drafting, but we should move on to Azuri and talk a little bit about. So tell me, when it comes to Azuri, what am I trying to do with Azuri? And why don't we talk about some of the cards that are a really high priority when drafting Azuri?
All right, so cards that you should prioritize highly in Azuri. I mean, the no-brainer being Death Touch. You can draft any of the cards with on hits, like cut down to size. You can draft Harbors, you can draft Wreck Havoc. All those cards are good in Uzuri. I would say that's the step 1 of drafting Uzuri. If you have multiple of those cards, your deck would tend to be pretty good. And then but having those cards are not enough because you need to enable your ability to work, so you have to draw some stealth cards. So stealth cards that are really good in Uzuri, mainly it could be any stealth card, because Uzuri's textures requires a stealth card. But better stealth cards are cards like Isolate, because Isolate allows your 2/6 to be able to go through because the opponent cannot play with more than one card. Cards like Backstab is also really good, but Backstab Backstab being a rare is a little harder to find. But because your opponent cannot react, and if you sneak in like a Wreck Havoc, then it's gonna go through here. Yeah, and with the upside of being able to flip open your opponent's arsenal, if your opponent's a ranger, you stop him from even getting the aim counter on his attack. Yeah, so any of those are good. Isolate is your best stealth card.
It's very good in blue.
It can be, honestly, it can be any color, because as long as you get the dominate effect on the blocking step, you tend to be able to get damage through your opponent. Yeah. So outside of stealth cards, your 2 for 6s, your basically your payoffs. You can draft cards like what's that card called? The virulent
A virulent
virulent touch.
touch. Yeah, the 0 for 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So virulent touch in any color, preferably 0 for 4 and or the 0 for 2, the blue or the red. Virulent touch, those colors of virulent touch are your best because in the case their opponent chooses to overblock or just block for 3, the red one can push 1 damage and give you a blood rod. And the blue one, if he overblocks, will give you a blood rod regardless of how many cards you block. It's because he already blocked from hand, and it counts. I think during the reaction step. Yeah, so you always give him the always give him the blood rod. Other than virulent touch, you could draft cards like Ravenous Rebel, which I mentioned before. You can cheat it in, so you ignore the detriment effect. So if your opponent chooses not to block with 0 for 1 isolate, because he doesn't want to get blown out by a 2 for 6, maybe he chooses to no block, take the 1 damage. You can tell oh wait, hold up. Here's a 0 for 3 go again, and here's a 0 for 4 behind it. Cards like that. Or even maybe you can even pay the full price for your big attack. You can just pay the 2 resource, you can attack for 6 behind it. So cards like that, and Ravenous Rebel enables you to extend your combat chain further than what people expect. Because Uzuri, people tend to assume that it's just
Spider
Bite single attack.
Yeah,
Spider Bite attack, and then that's the end of the turn. But
Yep.
cards like Ravenous Rebel extend your combat chain, which makes Uzuri a lot scarier.
Yep. There's
Yeah,
also
those.
the one cost generic, right? Because you have so many of these blue 1 base power attacks that kind of fuel your resource count and your blocking count that you can use. Is it called Looking for a Scrap, which is a great card in Uzuri in particular, I think.
Oh yes, yeah. Looking for Scrap is amazing in Uzuri because you tend to draft a lot of janky 0 for 1 self cards just to enable your ability. So looking for Scrap in yellow or red are really powerful because combined with Spider's Bite, you can actually start the turn with Looking for Scrap, which forces your opponent to make a play to block or to take the damage, or even maybe partially block the card, take 2 damage, and then now your Spider's Bite is much harder to block because he's already down a blocking card, and then your last attack will become like close to impossible to block because what cards do you have left?
Yeah.
So Looking for Scrap is also really good.
Yeah, the other cards. I want to ask you about ratios in Uzuri as well, but there's a couple of cards I want to touch on. And one card you talked about, Wreak Havoc, Humble, Cut Down to Size. We've spoken about all those. The one card that in Uzuri has really stood out to me has been Destructive Deliberation. This is the 2 for 5 that on hit creates a ponder. Do you like this card? So I've heard very different interpretations. Some people think this card is the worst of these effects. Some people that I play with think it's one of the best. Where do you land on Destructive Deliberation in red?
Okay. So this is a very interesting topic. So for Destructive Deliberation, a lot of the people I test with, they are really high on the card. They're like, this card is great. This card is a 2 for 5 with an on hit to ponder. You arsenal a card at the end. What's not to like about it? And then I'm there looking at the 2 for 5 and like, dude, we could do better than the 2 for 5. The ponder token. I mean, if you're arsenaling a 2 for 6, it doesn't enable your ability either. So maybe the ponder token is not that great, but I can see that there's like varying opinions of Destructive Deliberation. I can see the upside to it because the ponder is a really powerful token to have. It enables you to play out your whole hand and still get an arsenal. But for me, I feel that if I wouldn't early pick a Destructive Deliberation. That's my evaluation. But I can see the merits of picking a card if someone passes it to me, maybe pick 7, pick 6, pick 7. Yeah, I would be upset taking such a card.
Yeah, it's
But as an early pick, I'm not high on it.
Not high enough. I think the discourse comes from the fact that the Ponder token can be really high variance in Azuri because you have a lot of trash cards that are for blocking, a trash card, role players that are for blocking and for pitching for, and you do not want those cards in your arsenal because unlike Arachne, a blue stealth card, unless, I mean, that's not the end of the world because you can swap it in, but, maybe a blue card that is just a pure resource card, unlike Arachne who can play a stealth card and maybe use that card at the end of the chain, Azuri can't do that as much. What I will say though is that, and we haven't talked about this, but I'm sure we're about to talk about it, is Azuri plays defensive cards really well. So cards like Peace of Mind, Traps, and if you have a higher density of these plus just good attacks in your deck and you have less of kind of, awkward blues or awkward yellows, then your Ponder token is going to be worth more a lot of the time. And so that's where I think Destructive Deliberation has been shining for me, as in quite well fleshed out Azuri decks. But I've also, I've had it be, oh, here's a card I definitely don't want Arsenal a couple of times, and it's just been like you say, it's been worse than any yellow equivalent that has an on-hit effect, or definitely a red that attacks for 6. So, I see it. I want to ask about equipment, because we haven't really talked about equipment for either Arachne or Azuri, but in Azuri, one of the most important cards I've been finding, and I rank it really high, is particularly the tunic, the threadbare tunic, but I think even Silken Gi is pretty good, but the tunic in particular has been really overperforming for me, simply because of the fact that you don't always stealth and swap. You're not always using that hero ability, and sometimes you're able to, especially in late game situations, pivot off a 2-card hand, one in Arsenal, one in hand of blue, Spider's Bite into an attack from Arsenal off of the tunic or the gi.
Yeah, so tunic I would say is by far the best equipment of the set. Every class can use a tunic pretty decently, right? But in Assassin, I think it's a lot stronger as well because of how many 2-cost attacks you end up having to draft or drafting. Purely to stay open, you end up drafting a lot, or maybe the stealth cards aren't coming as hot, so you end up on Uzuri. That's where the tunic becomes a lot stronger as well. Not only that, is the tunic basically enables you to play certain hands that are awkward. Maybe in the late game situation where your opponent and yourself are both at 1 health, the tunic enables you to block with 3 cards, keep a blue, double Spider's Bite. I think having a tunic is extremely powerful in the assassin.
Do you compare it to maybe like something like Sash of Sandakai or Spellfire Cloak from Uprising? Is it that level of power?
I would rate it about the same as Sash and not Spellfire Cloak. You don't need to have it to have a really powerful assassin deck. You could live without it, is what I'm saying. But having it is a huge plus to your deck. Yeah.
What about traps? Let's talk about traps and defensive cards like Peace of Mind and Brush Off. How important are they to you in Azuri in particular, and how high are you drafting them? Like a trap, something that you're taking pretty high, because they can also potentially keep you open to Ranger, which I know is another class you like a lot.
So generally, I don't pick traps that highly early if I had a chance. I think there are a lot of cards better than traps. But for Uzuri in general, I think picking traps is actually really good if you want to play the more defensive Uzuri deck. So cards like actually previously when we brought up Destructive Deliberation, I think a defensive Uzuri deck actually benefits from the card a lot more than the offensive one because of variance. But in a defensive Uzuri deck, you get to arsenal traps, you get to arsenal Peace of Mind, and because of how Peace of Mind and traps give you more blocking cards, which is quite short in this format, Uzuri gets to utilize it the most because of basically her ability to play 2-card hands with her hero ability. So you can actually block with more than, you can block with 2 cards, you can block with a trap or arsenal, and you can even run your opponent out of cards with fatigue on Uzuri because of the strength of your weapon and the assassin cards being 3 blocks and the ability to be able to draft traps to play around, Benji's hero ability to play around, attack reacts from Arachne, to even play around other Uzuris or even other rangers. You can block with traps from Arsenal just to add on to the block value, and then you can get away with playing Peace of Mind because now that Ponder token in the defensive deck is what we have been saying with destructive deliberation, that's the same thing because you basically draw into more blocking cards. So you get to block from, you have more blocking cards to run your opponent out.
Yeah. It's Assassin is super deep and super interesting, I think, in this format, not only from a playing standpoint, like we've talked about, with all these different lines, with Spider's Bites, with your attacks, do you not? What is your opponent? Do they not? But also in drafting, and there's the aggressive versions, there's more defensive, like you're saying, where you load up on those cards and you look to really utilize Spider's Bite and maybe one attack and use that hero ability at key times, versus a more proactive that's looking to just extend the combat chain, like you're saying, Chu Heng, and really put the opponent to the sword and force them to block, which really makes Spider's Bites even more valuable. I want to ask, we're gonna play pack one, of course, as we always do on limited time only. But I want to ask you, before we head to that and towards the end of the show, do you have any just general tips that you really want to impart to people for playing Assassin in this format? Maybe it's some tips for the mirror, tips for playing against Ninja, whatever it might be.
So let's start with Aragni. The general tip for Aragni is you want to go second, except with Benji, because you are the fighting of the format. So always go second. You also do not want to let Riptide go second into you, because they get a free Arsenal card and suddenly they are playing a 5-card person. And as a Ragni, because you have to keep as many cards as you can, blocking you're not so hot on blocking. So yeah, you're the fire of the format. So for Ragni, generally you just want to go second. Except into Benji, because unblockable damage is pretty good, especially on the first turn. For Uzuri, I would say different matchups have you have different patterns to it. So for the mirror, I prefer to go first so I can utilize Spider's Bite more to force in. You can force the fatigue plan early on your opponent because you have to block the first turn, or you can choose to take Spider's Bite and then suddenly you can push you some damage, right? So, but into Aragni, obviously you don't want the Aragni go second into you. You want the tempo swing, and into ninjas on Aragni I will go second, but on Uzuri I tend to like to go first to prevent taking too much shoot damage from Kodachi. And also because ninjas block quite poorly this set. So when you attack with Spider's Bite and you end with like a big attack, chances are you'll actually force through some damage. So on Uzuri, I like to go first into ninjas. As for rangers, on Uzuri, I would also go second, purely because rangers, it's quite easy to run rangers out cards. Much Riptide less, but more for Azalea. Azalea, it's unless his deck is really good, it's unlikely that he gets to dominate an arrow on turn one. So you could actually just block out the attack, or you just let him arsenal and you take the tempo, you force him to block, and Azalea doesn't really like blocking too much, because if they overblock, they run out of time to kill you because they don't have enough cards. Yeah. And the defensive version of Uzuri is really good in the ranges. So letting them go first works into your game plan quite well.
Yeah. Make them either try and
It's
set
either
up or play
they
cards.
pass the turn, or you get free attacks on the second turn because you have tempo. They can either choose to take the damage and play into your defensive game plan, or they can block you and also play into your game plan of running them out cards. So either way works. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Anything else before we play pack one?
Any other tips? I mean, we have already mentioned it. Weave in the Spider's Bite between the attacks on Aragi, and on Uzuri. Oh, especially Uzuri, if you're playing against another class that can play Blood Rot Trap, you should try to play around it as much as you can, because that trap is, every time you activate your hero ability, that trap is 3-2 damage. So as much as you can play around that card, you should. But you can't always play around it. Yeah, that's about it, I think.
Cool. Great tips. Yeah. I think there's so much more we could touch on. The class is so deep. It's a bit different to, we're talking about Uprising, but let's move on because we are running out of time. Let's play pack one, pick one. Chu Heng, you have the pack there in front of you. We pre-provided the image to Chu Heng to make sure that we could do this in a timely fashion. So I'm going to read for any audio listeners out there while Chu Heng takes a look at this pack and makes a decision. The cards in the pack. So we have yellow Surging Strike, we have blue Wither, we have red Come to Fight, red Widowmaker, yellow Malign, red Destructive Deliberation, card we've talked about today already, yellow 1/2 Punch, red Murkmire Grapple, red Seek Horizon. Our equipment is the Seeker's Gloves. We have a red Plunge, we have a red Hurl. Our other rare is Majestic, red Give and Take, and then our foil is a blue Scout the Periphery. So a pretty reasonably red heavy pack here, and a pretty strong pack, Chu Heng. So why don't you talk us through kind of the cards that grab your attention, the first things that you're thinking about when you look at your pack one, pick one.
All right. So the first thing that you have already mentioned is a red heavy pack. It's one of the better packs to open, especially for first pick. So the cards that grab my attention immediately are the red Counter Fight, red Widowmaker, actually the red Give and Take, and the Surging Strike. So for me, I generally do not like to first pick like cards like Seek Horizon, because I feel that Seek Horizon is not as powerful as a card like Counter Fight, purely because it's generic, it's a 0/4, but for the go again effect, it becomes like a lousier leg tap because you cannot utilize your pitch as much. So I try not to pick it, and I've been through Destructive Deliberation. I don't rate the card too highly early. Yeah. So I would say the standouts of the pack for me are Come to Fight, Widowmaker, and Give and Take. After that, because Surging Strike forces you into a very tricky class to draft, which is Ninja. And okay, so outside of that, Come to Fight is a generically good card in Ranger and Assassin. You can play Come to Fight in Arachne quite a bit. You can even play it in Uzuri because you can maximize your blue pitch. You can blue pitch one Come to Fight, play a 2-cost attack. That's the strength of Come to Fight. And Give and Take is one of the harder cards to get because for one, it's Majestic, and for two, there's no other card like it because it's a 3 blocking go again attack. There's no other 3 block go again attack in this set, if I'm not wrong.
No, you're right. And also it provides you with potential recursion, with something that you don't get in the set as well.
Exactly. So it also plays around other people's fatigue plan. So if you're trying to run your cards, this card actually gives you cards back, which is not, there's only like the only other card that gives you cards back is a legendary, and it's a Quiver. So yeah. Okay, I think the interesting card that I think people will take note of is red Widowmaker. So red Widowmaker in my like experiments with Azalea, is one of Azalea's core cards. And because of how I feel Azalea should be built in terms of deck building, red Widowmaker rates very highly on the scale. So if I were looking to draft Azalea, I would actually first pick red Widowmaker. On the day itself, I was like, okay, I feel like drafting Azalea today. I would take red Widowmaker. But other than that, the card that I'll take from this pack will probably be Give and Take purely because it's generic and how powerful the BT. Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense. Keep you open. It goes into every deck you're going to play.
Yeah, exactly.
And you, like you said at the start of the pod, you value staying open. One card I do want to ask you about, actually 2 cards quickly. Seeker's Equipment. Now, we talked about, this kind of defensive Azuri decks, particularly for Assassin. I'm talking about Seeker's Equipment now. Where do you see those in the kind of pick order for Assassin? Like, are you draft them highly? Do you only draft them if you have peace of mind? Where do you kind of see them sitting?
I wouldn't draft it during the first cycle, which is like maybe the first 8 picks. I will try not to draft the Seeker's Equipment. The best Seeker's Equipment is actually the boots. The leg piece, yeah, because there's the only other replacement is the Fleetfoot Sandals, which honestly is not fantastic. It has applications, but it's not fantastic. So yeah, so other than the leg piece, I probably wouldn't draft Seeker's Equipment too much because you don't need it for a deck to perform well, but it's one of those like, it's good to have. It allows you to play around weaker attack reaction. Maybe people try to go over your attacks by 1 and then you get to block it for free. Or maybe you get to value it off a piece of mind with a blue pitch. So yeah, that's what I see about CK Secret.
What about Plunge? Talk to me quickly about Plunge. Do you like this card? This card is something that I thought the red was going to be good. It continues to be more awkward than I would think.
Plunge is good in Ninja, bad in Assassin because if you present a 2 attack dagger, the guy's probably gonna block it because he has an on
It's
hit.
good value.
So yeah, so it's good value. It incentivizes your opponent to block too much.
Yeah, to play correctly.
But in Ninja, it's efficient. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in Ninja is very efficient. It's a 1 for 3 that allows your Kodachi to hit 4 and out for 2. You know. Yeah.
Cool.
I like it in Ninja, but not in Assassin.
All right. I think I'm on the same page as Chu Heng here. I think I would take the give and take. I think second for me would be the come to fight. I really value staying open in this format. I like drafting all the classes. So, but yeah, if I had a preference, then the Widowmaker would be high as well. I want to thank you for joining me on Limited Time Only, Chu Heng. I'm so glad that I finally got you on Arsenal Pass to have a conversation. You're someone I think has such an interesting mind for the game. Before we sign off, how about if people want to interact with you or follow you on social media, things like that, where can they find you, or Discords, things like that? Are you active in any Discords?
Active. I'm not so much active in any Discord, but I do check in, especially like just to get ideas on deck building for Classic Constructed. Maybe I get some ideas on, limited, see what people's opinions are, where people can find me. Generally, outside of Discord, you can find me on Twitter actually. I tweet once in a while. I think my Twitter handle is Pikachu XDXD for now.
Yeah, it's on the screen. People can see it underneath your face here. So if you're looking on YouTube, you can see it.
Yeah, so that's where you can find me. I also have a blog, which I haven't been updating recently because there's really not much to update. But I do post like my thoughts on going to tournaments or post-tournament like report sometime, or like preparation. I might do a post on limited, since there's really a lot to talk about limited. So I might do like a post soon. Whenever I have the time. Yeah. But outside of that, if you're in Singapore, you can find me at any events. I've heard. I tend to go to most of them. Yeah. Yeah. That's about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on and letting me twist your arm to come and do the pod and be on Limited Time Only. Gonna see you very soon, actually. Yeah. I'll be seeing you in Singapore in June, which is very exciting that there's going to be a second calling there. So looking forward. Hopefully we get a match this time. That'd be great. So
yeah, I look forward to that. I'm honestly really grateful that you got me on the pod.
All of Singapore will be happy.
Yeah. I'm very enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic playtesting partners, especially shout out to our national champion, Gordon, who beat me in the semi-finals at nationals. He's also going to Pro Tour, the Pro Tour 3. Yeah. So best of luck to him. Most of my draft tips are also like given to him. So hopefully he does well.
Yep, Gordon's set up for success. All right. That is going to do it for episode 4 of Limited Time Only. How to draft Assassin with Chu Heng. And until next week, we'll see you on the next pod.
All right. Thank you for having me.